Hello, my name is Brian Westley Johnson, and I'm the CEO and publisher of Soulivity.com. Looking ahead to editorial discussions that are of great importance to all of you, our readers and listeners, we have created an ongoing special editorial feature section dedicated to assessing health access and the lack of equity facing the majority of Americans. This special editorial commitment is part of a growing discussion which focuses on challenges and solutions facing communities across the United States. Soulivity will spotlight widely known health inequities, the critical importance of broadening health research, valuable guidance and insights from renowned health professionals, and the accredited resources necessary to empower and mobilize our highly connected and socially active audiences. And we're looking forward to providing you even more empowered content in the near future. And I want to thank you for joining us for this Bridging the Gap Health Forum. My name is Brian Westley Johnson, founder and CEO of Soulivity, and it is my pleasure to be your host and your moderator for today. Now, each month, our health forums are dedicated to raising awareness about important health topics, including the latest trends, research, and resources for creating health equity for all. Now, before we begin, I need to go over a bit of housekeeping. During this forum, we ask that you be respectful to your fellow attendees. And while we honor and respect discourse, we require both panelists and attendees to maintain a high level of civility. Now, attendees, if you have comments or questions during today's forum, feel free to post them throughout the event as we post them to our larger audience during the time that we have today, with certain questions posed to our panelists during the question and answer period later in the program. Now, with that, let's meet our esteemed panel of panelists who for today's mental health forum on More Than Enough, the importance of self-worth and community. Now, these are well-accomplished professionals, so let's honor each of their long introductions. Kevin Fischer is the executive director of NAMI Michigan. Now, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. A retired businessman, Kevin joined NAMI as a volunteer in 2011 after his oldest son, Dominique, was diagnosed with a mental illness in late 2007 and lost to suicide in 2010. After serving on the NAMI Michigan Board of Directors as the NAMI Walks chairperson for 2 years and as board vice president for 2 years, Kevin accepted the role of executive director in 2014. A mental health and suicide prevention advocate, Kevin is the founder and director of the Dominique Fischer Memorial Foundation, serves on the board of directors of several behavioral health organizations throughout Michigan, including Governor Whitmer's Suicide Prevention Commission, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Mental Health Diversion Council and Behavioral Health Advisory Council, Disability Rights Michigan Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness Advisory Board, and is a member of the Crisis Intervention Team International Board of Directors. Quoted as saying, "This is his last job, his last fight. Kevin is dedicated to eliminating the stigma of mental illness, which he considers the leading barrier to early diagnosis and treatment, which leads to better outcomes for all." Welcome, Mr. Fischer.
Thank you, sir.
Melva Johnson is the co-founder of the Johnson Relationship Institute for Couples, co-author of the book Mining for Gold in Your Marriage, and an author of 10 Secrets to a Long-Lasting Passionate Marriage. She has more than 4 decades of experience as a psychotherapist, relationship educator, workshop leader, public speaker, co-author, and consultant. She has appeared with her late husband, Jesse, on local and national radio, as well as television shows, and has been featured in numerous print media. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan. She is a licensed master social worker and certified Imago relationship therapist, workshop presenter, and consultant. Melva says, each day I see couples determined to beat the odds and work to healthier, happier relationships. I am here to provide and guidance and support they need to achieve that goal. I personally know the ups and downs of marriage with my late husband, Jesse, and know from personal and professional experience how to work together to create lasting love to thrive together for over 40 years. I would like to share that with you what I have discovered. Welcome, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Lorenzo Sewell has had an incredible journey to get where he is today. Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, he experienced a tumultuous upbringing with his father being convicted of murder and his younger brother also losing his life to violence. Despite these difficult circumstances, Lorenzo persevered and graduated with a bachelor's degree in biblical studies from Destiny University. Lorenzo devoted his life to serving his community, particularly in the cities of Detroit, Saginaw, Pontiac, and Flint, all in the state of Michigan. He was ordained as a senior pastor of 180 Church and established the nonprofit organization, Them, with the mission of providing a pathway out of crisis and improving transportation, healthcare, education, and mental health. By leveraging his charitable works, Lorenzo is helping to build a brighter future for those in need. After the tragic death of George Floyd, he decided to take action and channel his energy into making a change. He co-founded Diversity in You, a cultural coaching firm that aims to educate, diversify, and empower workplaces. As CEO, Lorenzo works hard to create meaningful long-term relationships with companies and organizations while offering a wide range of services to help build an inclusive, equitable, and diverse workplace. In addition to Diversity in You, he also founded the executive virtual assistant agency, Sewell Strategy LLC, which provides virtual assistance to business owners and entrepreneurs. This revolutionary platform allows employers to hire virtual assistants for half the market price while guaranteeing the same quality of service. Welcome, Pastor Sewell. I am so glad all of you are here. So much to talk about when it comes to this topic. Want to begin our conversation today by level setting our discussion with some reasoning about self-worth. Now, in an article published by the National Institutes of Health entitled Self-Esteem and Health, it reads, society is riddled with inequity of natural endowment and talent, of opportunities and life chances, and of achievement. We respect achievement. Hence, these inequalities will be accompanied by inequality of respect. This in turn will be accompanied by inequalities of self-esteem. Now, to each of you, if I change the word self-esteem to self-worth, and I asked of you, do such inequalities in self-worth matter? What would be your answer? And Kevin, I'll go to you first.
You know, that is a really interesting question. And I would say yes, there is, I would think that the definition changes. We have to have a strong sense of self. It's necessary. In the landscape of the work that I do in behavioral health care, we talk about self-determination, person-centered planning. Those are very strong metrics in our world, where person has to have a strong sense of self. So yeah, I think the way you frame that and the way we change that terminology does have some impact. and it has an impact on our overall sense of well-being. So I'll pause there.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Ms. Johnson, what about you?
I agree. And I think about the part, it's a two-pronged thing. The self-worth is, I am valuable no matter what is going on in my life, no matter what the circumstances are. And so if I matter and I have value, then I deserve to have what I need to survive in this world, to function and actually pursue my dreams. Now, anything that I do that is somewhat an expression of my self-worth is a reflection of my self-esteem in terms of how I show up with my abilities, my achievements, and what have you. However, with my self-worth, if I'm not depending on outside approval of anyone to be who I am, to do what I need to do for my life mission and and purpose, and to have the outcomes that I would like to have in life.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And what about you, Lorenzo? What are your thoughts around this?
Well, when you think about self-worth and you think about self-esteem, I believe our atmosphere screams to us. Where we were raised, what school we went to, our parents around us, our professional careers, our religious affiliations, it screams to us our value and our worth. And I believe we spend most of the time being self-deprecating in terms of the way we think about ourselves. I believe the research shows that out of all the thoughts that we think, about 80% of those thoughts are negative. So I believe the renewing of the mind, and as a person begins to think in their self, so they are. And as a Black man, I believe it's extremely difficult to see people that look like you, that scream self-worth, that's not rapping, that's not dribbling a ball or catching a ball, but that can actually show you a new vision of your future. And I'm speaking from my experience. So I believe self-worth and self-esteem work together, but your atmosphere screams that to you every single day.
Thank you. Oh, wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. Want to do a follow-up question then. Now, based upon what you just said, right, in terms of if this really matters, my next question to each of you, and I'll go to you, Ms. Johnson, first. How does this, in terms of self-work, impact the work that you do and the communities that you are serving?
Well, I've been blessed to be able to function in two different categories. Initially, my late husband and I worked in the school system. And so we had an opportunity to work with parents to support them, to empower them to be part of their children's education. And so we were blessed to be able to set up what were called school community councils, where parents, community leaders, administrators, and students were able to work together on behalf of the students. And so in that vein, parents were able to get in touch with the fact that they did matter and that they did have input in working with, having impact on the success of their students. And then the other part is working with people one-on-one and in groups as a therapist. People having an opportunity to just see where their point level was, their set point was with their self-worth, and them being able to see, you know what, I can be better, I can do better, I can have better, just because I am walking on this earth as a human being. I deserve to be who I want to be. And I can take that to the next level in terms of my mindset and my skill set. And I can focus on that bigger purpose.
Thank you for that. I saw you kind of nodding there, Kevin. Got some thoughts about this?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time, and I always have to put my disclaimer out there. I say this with sincere humility. I spend a lot of time in rooms with very important people, whether they are legislators, pastors, lawyers, leaders of law enforcement agencies. I sit in a room with a lot of people, and I am very comfortable in those rooms um, because I have a strong sense of self. The other is I work really hard um, to have a knowledge level that prepares me to sit at the table with those people. Again, I sit there with judges, prosecutors, um, and to be able to do what I do, I have to have a strong sense of self. I'm going to go back a little bit to I worked for United Parcel Service for almost 20 years. And I remember when I went into sales, my first sales manager asked me a question. He said, "Do you want to be good or do you want to look good?" And he said, if you are good at what you do, you never have to worry about looking good because it will always shine through. And I've carried that with me for the last 40 years because I want to be good. I want to be good at what I do. I want to be respected for what I do. And as a result of that, I receive that respect. And that doesn't matter if I spend a lot of time with young people. I spend, again, a lot of time with very important people as we see them in our society. But I'm always comfortable in that space because I work to be good at what I do and to bring value to the communities that I serve. And that's paved the way for me.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Lorenzo, what about you? What are your thoughts when it comes to this? Because you're working in the communities every single day. So what are your thoughts?
So when I think about Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw, when I think about the communities that we have the honor to serve with our four pillars of purpose, transportation, housing, education, and healing the unseen illnesses of medical, mental, and dental illnesses, I simply just pull on my story. Born and raised on the east side of Detroit, mentored by a murderer, student of the streets, and I had a radical experience with Jesus. So that's the church piece. But on the business side of it, it's understanding that my ancestors paved a way that they never got paid for.
Right.
And with
Right.
that mindset, I go into whether it be Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw, and quite frankly, I fight the good fight of faith for our young people and all of our families to be able to pull our people out of poverty because I do believe we deserve it. Because we've built this country and everyone has eaten of the fruit of our labor but us.
Wow. As I'm thinking about what each of you are talking about in different aspects, I cannot help but think that self-worth and economics and these kind of things are completely intertwined, right? I mean, we're talking about things that have been historic in terms of specifically in communities of color. A lot of things have changed over the years between what the promise was as opposed to the realities of today, given, different legislatures and political issues and that kind of thing. To each of you, and I'll go to you first, Pastor, on this. What are some of the critical points that you see in your work around why it is that people's self-worth is at where it is in their lives?
I think it's four things. The first thing is safety. Me being a kid who's from the east side of Detroit, but yet I'm in Pontiac, I'm in Flint, I'm in Saginaw, right? We find ourselves wanting to be in Benton Harbor. And what I'm beginning to find out is people just don't feel safe, right? People just don't feel like they can go to a place without some type of violence. So that's number one. Then number two is atmosphere. A lot of people feel like you need to be away from Black people to have prosperity. So Jim Crow is geographical now, right? So Jim Crow isn't necessarily a sign saying colored and white here. It's about geography. Many Black people feel like you need to be away from Black people to be prosperous, right? So it's that component of it. So that's the second thing, atmosphere. The third thing is preferred future. There are very few people that are in higher education right now about to graduate, perhaps went through a commencement speech, feeling like I want to move to the east side of Detroit, or I want to move to Pontiac, Flint, or Saginaw. You don't see Black folks wanting to have a preferred future around other Black people. And then the E stands for education. And at the end of the day, our education system is broken, right? We have had billions of dollars given to our education system, but yet we're building buildings in the city of Detroit, but we aren't educating kids in the city of Detroit. And then that goes beyond, but I can speak to Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw, because that's where I serve. So it's four things. People don't feel safe. I see people, they don't have the atmosphere where they feel like they can be able to have a future, and then a preferred future. And then also E is the education. It's an acronym, SAFE.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Mr. Fischer? Kevin, what do you think about this?
You know, I think about life, and I love what Pastor Lorenzo just had to say. I'm a product of my environment, and I'm from Highland Park, Michigan, and I'm very proud to be from Highland Park. But, you know, there's an old saying, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. My father had a sixth grade education from Texarkana, Texas. He wasn't a formally educated man, but he was a bright man. And I am always so grateful to him. And I lost my dad 44 years ago. But I still remember all he poured into me. It shouldn't matter if I was brought up in Highland Park, east side of Detroit, or in Beverly Hills. It's what my parents poured into me, this strong sense of self. My parents taught me, don't let race be your barrier. Don't let that be necessarily how you pick and choose your friends. For example, we were the first Black family on our street in Highland Park in 1964. And it was an uphill, Highland Park was considered a suburb back then. But my father, I am so grateful to him, and my mother, who will turn 93 years old next week. I'm so grateful they didn't pour the pain of discrimination and racism that they experienced coming up from the South. My mom's from a small town in Mississippi. They poured hope in me. They poured faith in me. And that's something I forgot to mention earlier. And Pastor always makes me think about, I'm here by faith. I stand on the shoulders, and this sounds a little cliche, I stand on the shoulders of all who came before me. But I'm here by faith, and I'm blessed with the love and the sense of self that my parents poured into me. And we need to do that for our young people. Again, because like Pastor Zoe said, or my own pastor says, we can come up the rough side of the mountain. That doesn't mean that's where we have to stay.
Right.
And to Pastor's comments earlier, we shouldn't have to flee where we came from to feel safe or successful either. We should be able to create those safe havens in our communities. We shouldn't be afraid to be in our communities. And some of that, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, so much of that is within our control. It's not what's the government going to give us. We can control so much more of that than we take responsibility for.
Listen, we're going to take a quick break and let this kind of settle in with everyone who's watching today. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about, like, are there some other avenues that we need to be talking about, right? Are there some other kind of concepts that we haven't touched on that we need to in this discussion? So listen, everyone, stay where you are. We're going to take this break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Each year, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness. and 17% of youth ages 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder.
I joined NAMI because I have 2 sons that live with a mental illness, and I didn't want any other families to feel alone like I did.
At NAMI, the first thing we want anyone to know is you are not alone in your mental health journey.
I just really want to talk about so people know that you don't have to go through it alone.
NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. We started as 2 moms, gathered around a kitchen table in 1979. And today, we are an alliance of more than 600 local affiliates and 48 state organizations who work in your community to raise awareness, build advocacy, and provide support and education. NAMI envisions a world where all people affected by mental illness live healthy, fulfilling lives supported by a community that cares. Every year we are expanding, no matter race, religion, age, or sexual identity. We are people with lived experience, families and loved ones, survivors and advocates, and together, we will fight the stigma surrounding mental health and create a better world for the sake of all of us. We have resources for you and can't wait to become an extension of your family. We are here for a healthier world. We are here for better mental health. We are here for each other. Join us.
And we are back with more of our forum, More Than Enough, the importance of self-worth and community. We've been talking a lot about different aspects of like impact and that kind of thing. And Kevin, you just had really great thing to say about that listen, we can be more than just our circumstances, right? That where we come from, if we have the support. Mrs. Johnson, Melva, can you speak a little bit about this in your particular life experience? I know that as a school community administrator, there were all these resources that were available to both parents and children years ago that don't exist within our schools today. Can you talk a little bit about, what you saw back in the days, we're talking in the 70s, early 80s, and contrast that with now and how that relates to self-worth?
Yes. And I want to start with the opportunity to empower parents to instill self-worth at home. And which is one of the things that we were able to do when we did workshops for parents to empower parents. I believe self-worth, and we've already heard examples already of it happening with Keith and the pastor. And that is my favorite thing to do in terms of that first step to empower people in the community is to empower the parents at home, whether the parents are together or whether they're together under the same roof. And just a basic skill, a basic opportunity to provide for every person in the household to feel valued because they feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel understood. And when people have that experience, then they're in a position to see other people, to hear them, to understand them. And so when you take that up into the community, you become a resource as you explore other resources, talking about how can we work together to address the lack of access in inequities. And so since we have that foundation, we can explore together because we are working in harmony at home and in our community. I think that is the first step.
Okay. I mean, I'm loving this conversation, guys. Kevin, I saw you nodding there. Do you have some additional comments that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and I love what Ms. Johnson just said about empowering parents. You know, again, my parents were not formally well educated. My dad completed the 6th grade, my mom completed the 10th grade. And I'm going to tell a really brief story, and I'm getting to a point. My dad worked in the auto industry, and he worked 12-hour days. So most days in my early years, I didn't see my dad until the weekends. But my dad always made room to come to parent teachers conference. And he would come to parents teachers conference, and he would literally tell the teachers, I don't have the skill set to help Kevin with algebra. I don't know that. But he would challenge them to say, if my son needs a resource, if he needs tutoring, if he needs whatever, you tell me and I will find that. I will get that for him. And he would literally say, do not send my child home at the end of the semester with a failing grade, and I'm not heard from you the entire semester. He would lay that out every year. And he would also, being from the South, he would add, if my child is misbehaving in class, you only need to call me one time and I'm going to fix that, because I send my kids to school to learn. And I'm saying that because I'm thinking about what Ms. Johnson said about empowering parents. Far too often, we parents go to the school, we go to parent teachers conference, we go to counseling sessions when they call us to say our children are acting out, and we take the word of that teaching professional. Well, and they sometimes label us, Kevin's a bad child because he won't sit still in school and those kinds of things. We need to be able to question back in a respectful manner. Tell me exactly, when you're saying Kevin's acting out in class or Kevin's bad, tell me exactly what that means, because or what that looks like, because we need to understand, is Kevin failing school or is the school failing Kevin? Because we all come to this with different talents and different learning abilities. Sometimes I might not learn the way the school or the way that one teacher wants to present to me. And again, I'm going to go back to, don't go to the school and threaten the teacher and that kind of thing, but have healthy dialogue to say what my dad used to say for me. Tell me what he needs and I will find it. I'll find that resource. But don't just send my kid home and say he's a bad kid and throw him away. I work with the Juvenile Mental Health Court here in Detroit, and it's interesting. There are kids that if we didn't have this Juvenile Mental Health Court, if we didn't have this program, a lot of these kids would be kicked out or sent to alternative ed, and we'd be throwing them away in our society. But what we find out when they say, well, Kevin is acting out, well, what is that? What does that look like? Because maybe, and I'm not labeling all our kids, but in this particular case, we find out that some of these kids are living with some serious emotional disturbance or something like that. So we provide the family with the tools to help them. And I'm so proud of this program, because at such a high rate, these kids are graduating high school with honors, when in their freshman, sophomore year, we were getting ready to throw them away. Wow. So parents need to be empowered. Parents need to be able to go to the school and say, what does my child need? And be able to help my child, not just let them be labeled and discarded.
Which I see, Pastor, that you're nodding as well. It seems like there's this connection, right? Where if society is basically throwing away kids, then how do you expect there to be communities that are strong and healthy and practical and progressive and all the other things that we want out of our communities? Can you speak a little bit to this yourself?
Absolutely. Every year we invest about $125,000 in Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw. We do that through a basketball tournament. The reason why we invest in basketball, because we use recreation to lead our young people to education. So we scholarship approximately 30 children every year to Rochester Christian University. And what we've come to find is many of our children are undereducated because of the racist idea that our kids can't be educated. A lot of our parents don't get empowered because of the racist idea that Black men aren't in a home. That can't be true, because CDC shows that out of all the men that have the most interaction with their children is Black men. as it pertains to changing diapers, as it pertains to spending time with them. So it's not that Black men aren't in the home, right? Just because a Black man and a woman isn't married, that doesn't mean that a Black man isn't engaged with his child. So what I begin to realize is once we tear down these racist ideas as it pertains to our children being able to learn, once we cast down these racist ideas that there are no Black men in the home, then we can empower our parents. I have the privilege and honor of working with a parent group in Pershing, have the privilege and honor of working with parent groups in elementary schools and middle schools, specifically Burns Elementary School and Middle School. And we have a dad group of about 50 men. And these men are engaged with their children. Only thing they need is what we're advocating for is a PTA or a PTO. I believe that being able to make sure that our parents have those PTAs and PTOs, that gives them a mechanism to get the funding that they need to be able to resource their children. And adversely, I believe that we need to build our own institutions, just like my Caucasian colleagues have schools like Hillsdale, right? Where you have these schools that don't depend on a dollar from the government, and they're able to do what they need to do in their own communities. I believe that we as Black Americans, we need to begin to galvanize our own resources to make sure we can build our own institution. We don't have to depend on any government funding.
Mm, mm, mm. All right. All right. Okay. We are having a discussion today, aren't we? You know, before we go to break here, because I want to make sure that we're getting our audience in on this as well and get their feedback on this, because this concept of self-worth seems to me that it is absolutely foundational to having a good life, to pursuing one's passion and purpose, to raising families and that kind of thing. And if we're talking about systems that have been created that bar that, then we've got to have that conversation about how we're going to cure that. And so, doing it, you know, as you suggested, Pastor, doing it within our communities. Maybe there's policy discussions that need to be had, but I'm glad that we're having this discussion today, and that this will be one of many continuing discussions around this concept, because it's something that we're not talking about, right? It's just not something that we're not talking about. Self-esteem and self-worth and self-love and self-awareness and all these as part of the larger discussion of how we operate in our society. That these are just givens, and that, you know, that's on your own. This is individual kind of thing when it's more than that. Why don't we take another quick break? But when we come back, I'm going to get our audience in on their thoughts, their feelings. So our audience members, if you have questions, if you have thoughts or comments, go ahead and post them to our channels now. And then we'll highlight some of those in the next round as we move forward. So we're going to take this break, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Welcome
to Howard University.
Don't let anyone tell you there are things we cannot change. We've done hard things before. We'll face hard things again, but we're doing it. We've spent the past 20 years advancing ways to repair heart valves so more people can return to their normal lives. When every second counts during a stroke, we're shaving hours off treatment times to save more people from disability. When some people experienced mysterious COVID symptoms and had nowhere to go, our team created the first center for post-COVID care. And so thousands of people will live, will go back to their kids, their partners, their parents, simply because a whole bunch of people in here keep making medicine better. So if anyone ever tells you there's no other way, don't listen. We find a way. Mount Sinai.
Wow. And we want to thank our partners who have been very, very, very generous and responsive to all of the things that we're doing. If you want to be a sponsor or a partner or supporter, please email us at bridgingthegap@soulivity.com, and you can join us in Bridging the Gap and have health equity for all. Um, got a great comment from Tanya Carroll, who is saying this narrative wording within self-worth, as Kevin Fischer was saying, being in control, as mental health issues and neurological diagnosis go hand in hand for those in life who also do not have any control in the way they were born and also were never told their neurological diagnoses until a time that comes to learn it once they are ready to do so, to learn what it means to them within a self-worth in a world that they live into. So my guess is Tanya is trying to put forth this idea of people who aren't even aware of what's going on with them, and that through that awareness, they can gain some self-worth and self-control and being really in control of their lives. Kevin, since you mentioned your name, can you talk a little bit about what Tanya is saying around this as well?
Yeah, in the space of mental health or mental illness, we often find people, and I happen to be with former Detroit Lions quarterback Eric Hipple a couple days ago, actually, and he was saying that it wasn't until he was diagnosed that they had a name for what he was experiencing, because he didn't understand it. He didn't understand why he was acting or reacting the way he was until he was diagnosed. And I hear a lot of people who live with mental illness make that same comment, because once I know what it is, now I know how to fight it. Now I know how to live with it. Now I know how to cope with it. My son Dominique taught me so much, in the 2.5 years between the time he was diagnosed and the time we lost him. I learned so much from him. And one of the things he told me one day is, he said, Dad, even though I have this diagnosis, and Dominique was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, he said, I'm still here. I present differently, and he said, I'm no less intelligent than I was before they put this label on me and that stigma. But he said, Dad, I'm still here. And he said, it hurts me when people talk about me like I'm not in the room, or like I'm not intelligent enough to understand what you're saying about my life, what I am living with. And he and I came to a real understanding that I said, son, I won't disrespect you. I will talk to you like the man you are. Dominique was 20 years old when he was diagnosed and 23 when he passed. But he taught me that just because I live with this diagnosis doesn't mean I'm any less intelligent. Ladies and gentlemen, some of the brightest, most talented people who walk the face of this earth live with serious mental illness, Albert Einstein and on. So we have to learn not to stigmatize people or label them and make them feel less than. So I think that's what she was getting to, and I hope that helps address that question or that comment.
Excellent. Excellent. And Tanya, if you have an additional comment or question, please just post to our live feeds and we'll get to it. Staying in this vein, especially going to you, Ms. Johnson, Melva, around this. There has to be in the medical community, specifically mental health, this realization that the diagnoses that people have isn't all that they are meant to be, right? Going to what Kevin has said around stigmatizing that, it seems to me that there is this idea that when people have certain mental illness, that they need to be fixed, which also generates lower self-worth if they even are aware of it. Can you talk a little bit about, in the 40 years of you doing the things that you do, specifically as a psychotherapist and counselor, the importance of, I guess, people probably embracing what their diagnosis is with some support. Can you kind of talk about that part?
Yes. So my first step goes to, this is my situation, and I'm not going to let this situation define who I am. Because I value who I am, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to show up so that I feel peace inside, and so that I bring my best to the situation. Because, and actually, I don't deal with diagnosis. I shouldn't say that as a psychotherapist, but what I look at mostly is what it is that the person wants to experience in life, and what is in the way of them having that experience. And so, whether people have diagnosed mental illness or not, they still deserve a quality of life. And so it's so important to figure out how that's going to work for them, what resources are available. And, we hear a lot about what is not happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we focus on expands, if we keep thinking about what's not happening, then we're going to experience more of what's not happening. When we explore what's possible, then we're going to get in touch with the possibilities. And from what has been shared already, there's two powerful resources right here on this panel. How many people are talking about that? The word needs to be spread about what is available to lift people up and to support them. That's the direction.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Pastor, what about you? What are your thoughts when it comes to all this?
It's complex because we were, at least for me, I was raised in a context where if you say the term mental health, or even those terms weren't used, the first thing that was said was, you're retarded, you're not smart, right? So intelligence and mental health have always coalesced as it pertains to a person confessing, or a person saying, I'm struggling. How do you even get there, right? How do you even get to the place where it's okay not to be okay, right? What does that even mean? As Kevin would say, how do you take away that stigma? It's very interesting because in our context, we had a mass shooting in Oxford, and there were tons of resources given to the Oxford community. And even in the context of Oxford, that's in Oakland County, the city of Pontiac didn't close. And a lot of my friends, they were calling me and saying, Pastor, I don't understand. Every other school in Oakland County closed, but Pontiac didn't close. Why didn't Pontiac close? Because tragedy has become so normal in our context. Mm-hmm. So how do you make that which is functional, how do you make that normal, right? And I believe it takes the athletes that Kevin's talking to, and it takes others being willing to confess that it's okay not to be okay. For myself, I've struggled with suicidal thoughts, right? But if my dad didn't go to prison for murder because of his mental illness, and if I never would have met Kevin, I wouldn't be in therapy today, right? So you see that connection? You see that? My dad is in prison for murder. And if it wasn't for that, and me meeting a man like Kevin, I wouldn't be in therapy now for my own suicidal thoughts, right? So it takes the proximity. It's not just resources. It's the proximity of people that you trust that can look at you and say, it's okay not to be okay.
Kevin, are there other avenues that we need to be talking about, other pathways from your point of view, working at the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and you work with congressional people up on the Hill and that those type of things as well? What's the discussions that you guys are having around this, around other pathways and avenues to uplift communities so that everyone has a higher baseline of self-worth?
we have to be, and we have to become comfortable being our own best self-advocate. We cannot wait for somebody else to do it for us. I look at, and I get engaged in conversations all the time when, let's use the George Floyd murder as an example. People poured out in the street and protest. And in my opinion, it's just my opinion, George Floyd was our generation's Bloody Sunday. It brought people, it showed America the brutality of racism, just like Bloody Sunday did. And when you go back and you look at the protest, there were as many white folks out there protesting as it was black folks, because we brought the reality of racism into their living rooms. And I welcome that and I honor that. But we have to become our own best advocate. Part of the reason I do so much of what I do is because we need to be at the table. Protests are fine, marching, all of that's good. But the way I strategize is I need to be in the room and at the table so I can advocate not only for me, and I always tell people, I'm not advocating for Dominique because Dominique's gone. I'm advocating for everybody else who comes along behind the Dominiques of the world. And so, again, it allows me to sit at the table with those legislators, with those people in the judicial system, people and friends of the court. You know, we bring all those resources together. We shouldn't run from, we should be running toward it. We should be raising our hand and saying, I want to be at the table. And it's really interesting, Brian, and I come across this meme recently, and I don't know why it seems to keep popping up all of a sudden so often, but it talks about you don't, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't need to sit at the head of the table, because we have to have the belief that when I arrive at the table shifts. And so I've had the privilege and the honor of working in situations like sitting on the Governor's Suicide Prevention Commission, or being able to call a congressperson up and they say, oh, that's Kevin. They take the call. And again, you know, I love my relationship with Pastor Lorenzo because I come from the streets, but that doesn't keep me out of the boardroom. But it's all in how I advocate. It's all in how I present. And I need to say this because I know, you know, in the communities we come from, people think you have to sell out or suck up or do that. No, I am the authentic me. And I will tell you this, and I'll say it with absolute humility. Now those people seek me out and they say, Kevin, what's going on in the community? What resources do you need? How can we do this better? We have the power within us to do that. We can do that. We just have to be willing to sit down and learn how to advocate. And ladies and gentlemen, the definition of advocacy is simply being willing to fight for what you want or for what you believe in. And we're good at fighting, but we can use this as much as we use this. So I'm telling you, we are powerful. We just have to learn how to use it. We have to believe in ourselves, and we just need to show up and be a part of the solution. Again, I know it sounds cliche. We are the change we seek. We just have to be willing to get engaged and fight the fight.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Melva, what about you? I see that you have some thoughts going on here. Are there other things that we need to be taking into consideration when we're talking about this?
You know, I was thinking about, I just want to piggyback on what has been said. I was thinking about, in terms of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis, is that it's okay to get support. And sometimes you can't figure things out by yourself because you have tunnel vision based on your experiences and your defenses. And so how important it is to be in a situation with somebody that's going to support you to get to the root of any disconnect that you have from self-worth get to the root of it, work through it, raise your mindset so that you're thinking about the possibilities of what can be done, no matter what your mental status is, and then come up with how you're going to move forward. What kind of action step are you going to take in an empowered way? And who are you going to allow yourself to join your support system? So not only are they supporting you, but you're being a support person as well from an empowered position.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I'll round this session out with you, Pastor. Any additional thoughts? Anything that we're missing here?
I would have to echo the vision of my good friend Kevin. A clergy, whether you're a priest, a pastor, an imam, whether you are a rabbi, we
Oh, I think we're losing your.
Yep.
There we go.
Pastor Zoe, we lost your audio.
We lost your audio a little bit.
I'm sorry, it just connected to my car. He's going right back.
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good. And I was just mentioning the clergy, how important it is for the clergy community to make sure that we are able to galvanize our pulpits and our influence. Kevin and I, and it's his vision, and this is how we've gotten so close to gather priests and imams and pastors and rabbis together with the intention to resource our communities. I believe starting from that theological, influential space that we have, using that as a means to be able to, connect with our communities.
Brian,
Excellent point. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I go back to something Ms. Johnson said?
Yes, sure.
About having support in the home. My wife and people who know me know how I adore my wife. And it is because of the support she provides to me. My wife supports my vision, but she also challenges me. And we are very respectful to each other. It's so important to surround yourself with people who support you, but will also pull you by your coattails sometime and say, hey, you're going the wrong way. Unfortunately, we are comfortable. And when I say we, I think all people. We're comfortable when people are patting us on the back and patting us on the head and telling us that everything we're doing is great. But what we really need is to surround ourselves with people who will honestly talk to us and say, wait a minute, have you thought that through? Or are you willing to look at that through a different lens? And I've learned, I'll go back again to my experience at UPS. UPS had a mantra that you always seek counsel. You don't make large decisions in a vacuum or by yourself. And so I try to surround myself with people like you, Brian Johnson, like Pastor Zoe, like so many other people I've surrounded myself with who I can go to and seek counsel. And so I want us to understand, again, we have the power within us to accomplish these great things, but we also have to be able to make sure we surround ourselves with the right support systems.
Well, I think you guys are preaching today. You guys are bringing it out, Pastor. I think, I think you guys are bringing it on home. Listen, while we have some time left, and we kind of touched on it a little bit here, we're talking about our family dynamics, right? I think that we're all in probably agreement that our family, in whatever configuration it may be, is the cornerstone of our communities and society as a whole, right? What ideas do each of you have around how the family dynamic plays a role and can play a greater role in uplifting specifically our children's self-worth, as it revolves around like our mental health and that kind of thing. So, as you know, I'll open the floor to you, Ms. Johnson, because this is something that you have probably done throughout your career. So I'll go to you, and you know, I'll be humble in terms of your your thoughts about this.
What to be done at home?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to share what we did at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's for me, one of the things that worked for me, for us, and what I've shared with other families. I work basically right now with couples, but even when I work with individuals, and even when I'm in a community setting, that whole idea of having a way to create a space where everybody can show up and be who they are and share their hearts with each other. And so the way that we formalized it was that every week we had a family support, we called it our family support group meeting. And so during that time, it's like everybody had a voice. So I'm trying to say this briefly. So everybody had 15 minutes to talk about whatever their gripes were.
Go ahead.
Whatever their gripes were, whatever they were going through, whatever it was that they needed, whatever they accomplished that they want a celebrative response for, and then what kind of support did they want during the week. When I think about you this week, what do you want? What kind of support do you want? Just having some kind of system to touch in with everybody so that everybody knows that at this time, I have a space to show up, and I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be understood, and I'm going to be supported. So when I go out into the world, I have all of this on the inside. So I'm also a contributor and not just a receiver.
Wow.
Balance and
Wow.
giving and
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Pastor?
I think this is probably one of the most difficult things to do in a texting, tweeting, Instagram, Facebooking, FaceTiming, the whole nine, right? So I have a nearly perfect wife who blessed me with 3 nearly perfect children who range between the ages of 16 and 12. And Elijah, my son, is 15. So we have 3 nearly perfect children. And this is what I've learned. I've learned to spend time just being present off my phone with them, to be able to reinforce the value, not only in a group setting, but mainly one-on-one, especially with my girls. That time together, I believe, has been essential. My one daughter, I drive to work when she needs to go to work, because nowadays young people don't want to get licenses. I don't get it, but it is what it is. You know, so daddy's still driving, you know, but it's a blessing, right? Because I get to spend that time. If I could just summarize it, it would be one word: time. That young people understand love with time, and that's how we can enforce their mental health and their values.
All right. I love that. Kevin, I'll let you round this out. I know personally, you know, we've talked about being grandparents, and I know G Pappy, you know, you being G Pappy is a big thing. So time is very important to you. I know that is great. Do you have any additional thoughts around this?
No, I'll echo what Pastor Lorenzo said. It's all about time. You know, with my children, I utilize car time as we were commuting to and from either school or sports. We talked about life. We talked about school. We talked about the value of education. We talked about religion. We talked about girls. It was, you know, there's a play that was produced in Flint called The Family Car. And they did a play around the conversations we have in the family car going to and from funerals. I didn't, and of course, that wasn't in my vernacular at the time, but as a young father, I used the car time to stay connected to my kids. And people thought, well, you're trying to produce these pro athletes. That had nothing to do with it. It was the time in the car. So just me and my sons could have conversation about life, just like Pastor Lorenzo is talking about. And then to your point, yeah, look, let me tell you, grandparent thing, that's a great deal. Let me tell you, my grandson, the big boy, when he comes to the house, it's all about him. And to Pastor Lorenzo's point again, we don't deal with electronics. It's interesting. He has an iPad that my daughter sends with him. He's 4 years old. I think we pulled that iPad out of his backpack one time because
Wow.
G-Pappy, and he calls me G-Pappy. G-Pappy and Grandma get on the floor with him, and we play with the trucks, and we build cities, and we do those things. But he also loves to learn. He was reading at 2. I don't mean flashcards. I mean he was reading at 2. And
Wow.
he will say, we'll be on the floor playing with the trucks, and he'll say, G-Pappy, I want to read my books now. And we get the books out, and we read. And so it's pouring all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, this ain't about money. This is not about material worth. This is about just that one-on-one love with our kids and pouring. I said earlier, forgive me for going on, I'm so grateful to my parents for what they poured into me. We didn't have money. That's not what it was about. My father would take me to Palmer Park, and we would sit on a bench, and he would just talk to me. And he always encouraged me. He said, son, you need to spend time with yourself just thinking. I don't care what you're thinking about, but just think. And he poured that into me. And we have to give that to our kids now because, again, to Pastor Lorenzo's point, we live in this social media world and gadgets and games and all of that stuff. We got to put all that stuff down and spend time with our kids and not only talk to them, but listen to them, hear from them, what they need.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, we're going to take another quick break. But when we come back, everyone, we're going to have some final thoughts from all of our panelists. So stay tuned. Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame, living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime. And we are back with more of our Mental Health Equity Forum on More Than Enough, the importance of self-worth in community. This has been a great conversation, but we've got to wrap up here. But I want to make sure that we actually had some final thoughts. So Kevin, I'll go to you for any final thoughts you have about the topic that we've had today.
When we talk about bridging the gap in equity, I will say this again. We are the change that we seek. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Get engaged. Become your own best self-advocate, because you have the power within you to live the life you choose to live. Learn about what resources are available to you in your community. And if you don't have all the resources, then go to your faith leader, go to your city council, go and say, this is what we need, but don't wait for somebody else to do it. Start with yourself.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, so what I would add to that is, because I pay attention a lot to what's happening at home, to create a safe space for people to be who they are, to uplift and inspire people to do their best so that they can be their best, and take the resources within and the resources that you have from home out into the community so that you can be a contributor. So no matter what is happening in your circumstances, be sure that you are responding from a place of strength rather than reacting from a place of negativity and disempowerment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Pastor.
My final thoughts are you have a purpose. Whoever's listening, whoever's out there, you've been called. There's a story about an ancient rabbi where someone was challenging him about him not paying taxes. And his response was, render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, but render to God that which is God's. Now, why would he say that? Because he knew that the image and the inscription on the Roman coin at that time represented Caesar. But he also knew that the image and the subscription and that which was put on man, that imago Dei, the image and likeness of God, if you are breathing, you are worth it. God has a calling on your life. He has a purpose on your life. As long as there is breath within you, there is hope.
Wow. Wow. I'm glad I called on you last, Pastor. Because I think that is a perfect way to end today's panel and session on being more than enough, right? With hope and optimism for our lives and for our future and for our communities and for our society. So thank you for that. And thanks to all of you for being part of our panel today. As we end today's discussion, we want to honor, again, our amazing and growing list of partners and sponsors. With them, these health equity features and forums wouldn't be possible. If you or your organization want to find out more about how you can support the Bridging the Gap initiative, please email us at bridgingthegap@soulivity.com for more information. You can also visit our website at soulivity.com/bridging the gap to find out more information about upcoming events and feature interviews with our partners, including patient stories that are going to come in the near future. Again, that is soulivity.com, bridging the gap. Listen, on behalf of everyone here at Soulivity and our partners and our amazing panelists, this is Brian Westley Johnson thanking you for joining us this evening. And as you move forward with your lives, keep having these kinds of real conversations with some passion and purpose so that we can create a life full of high quality living for everyone. Thanks again, and bye for now.